everyone. How are you doing?
Hey.
So our next conversation is about feeding the world during a period of uncertainty as climate heats and demographics shift. Inari is tackling that challenge by bringing advanced biology and computational design to one of the biggest levers that we have in agriculture, which is the seed. This is deep tech with potential for real-world impact. And we're going to look at some of the challenges, how you fund, how you price, how you scale a startup in this space. So to unpack the strategy, to unpack the science as well, I'm delighted to be joined by Lara Smith Weber, the CFO of Inari. So Lara, delighted that you are here with us today. I guess sort of like the first question is just kind of, can you just give us the big picture? Tell us about Inari, what problem are you trying to solve, and how are you going about it?
No, sure, happy to. So thank you, and also delighted to be here today. So agriculture is an industry that has been around for centuries, and there has been innovation in agriculture. So the introduction of nitrogen fertilizer in the early 1900s, a lot of technology and machinery and how we actually farm, GMO in the 90s. But in the last 20 plus years, innovation has really stagnated. So we're seeing less than 1% yield gain per year in farming, facing a global population which has gone from 2 to 4 to 8 billion people. And on top of that, it's fairly expensive. So the big players are spending $4 to $5 billion a year in R&D costs. And so we really thought, can we take advantage of technology? Can we use AI? Can we use gene editing, some of the things that have come up in the last years, to create seeds at 1/3 the time, 1/10 the cost, and 10 times the performance. And that really is the underlying premise at Inari. So we produce seeds, we generate seeds that produce greater yielding crops with less inputs, and we do that in a much faster and cheaper way than in the past.
So I'm interested just to pick up on something you just told us, which is really, I think, sort of slightly terrifying. The yield increase of, did you say 1% is what we've been having? Can you just explain why that is, why it's not increasing at a higher rate?
Well, I mean, right now the technology that has, or the current technology and also the previous technology is breeding.
Yeah.
And what you do is you take, two parent plants, you take the genomes, you scramble them 1,000 times, and then you select the very best. And that's just generally the rate that you can actually then get an increase. They do get better over time, but they've also been cultivated. I mean, if you think about corn, for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
So it's harder and harder to get that genetic gain. And what's exciting about the times now is, so CRISPR, which won the Nobel Prize in 2020, is a technology that allows us to go in and precisely make changes in genes. So if you have a plant that's already phenomenal, instead of scrambling it, 1,000 times with a different genome, you can go in and precisely change the thing that you say, oh, I think this lever will actually make it, could generate a step change. So we make precise changes in the architecture of plants to then create higher yielding crops.
So, as you just kind of outlined with that, yield only increasing by 1%, this is hard stuff, right? We're dealing with atoms, not bytes, right? So it can't scale in the way that software does. How do you make this a business that can, we're in a tech conference here. Yeah. A lot of the businesses are software businesses that, as we were discussing earlier on, ship product in terms of weeks and months. You're thinking about things in a much larger scale. How do you think this in terms of being a business that can grow and scale in the way that a startup might?
Yeah, so I'll answer that in two parts. The first one is about the time frame, and weeks and months, certainly for software. So the typical development cycle in agriculture is 10 to 15 years. We're down to about 3 to 5 years. Of course, it takes more time than software. I'm just going to say, so the process is you generate ideas. We use AI. The reason tech is so exciting is we use AI to research to actually find genes in the genomes of plants, to look at gene combinations. We then use AI to filter which are the most we think are going to be the most promising to solve a certain problem we're looking at. And then we can even do simulations, or what we call dry lab assays, to figure out which of those are going to be best. And we can do that before we even go into wet labs and then real testing. But as a biologic and as a, in biology, we actually do need to then go into wet lab assays, then create plants, they go to the greenhouse, then they get tested in the field. So clearly it takes a little bit longer. But as I said, we're super excited that instead of 10 to 15 years, we're at 3 to 5. And then your second question, how do we scale this as a business and be more like a startup? So one very conscious decision at Inari is that we focus on what we're good at is technology. And we focus at tech, and we provide tech in the form of a parent seed. We then give that to seed company customers. They do production, they bulk, they put it in their bag under their label, and they sell that to farmers. And so that enables us to be, fast, nimble, and lean on the technology side, and then actually leverage other players in the industry who have those very deep relationships with farmers, who are good at doing the production for the more, I'd say, asset-heavy part of the business.
So could you just dig into that a little bit? So the business model is wholesalers, is it? Sorry.
Business model is B2B, so we sell to seed company customers, and there are thankfully some biggest, I'd say, growing regions. We focus on corn, soy, and wheat. Biggest growing regions are the U.S. and South America, and there are thankfully those seed company customers who are interested and actually really exciting. We have a number of contracts actually signed with the seed company customers already. So, and they, as I say, they take it and they bulk it in their bag, but it is take it, bulk it, sell it under their brand, under their label. So it's a benefit for them as well, because they're being able to put a much higher performing product into their portfolio.
Right, sure, that makes a lot of sense. And how do you get the feedback from the farmers themselves? Presumably you're tracking how it's performing in wherever it might be, somewhere remote in South America. How do you kind of ensure that feedback loop exists?
Yeah, so it's a great question. We do have we do feed lab loose at every stage of the process. So in the lab, we put we have a big data lake. It goes into data lake in the greenhouse, in the field. The first place we get field data is when we actually do testing ourselves. So like in kind of biotech, pharma, we use CROs to do testing. So we'll have some of that data. And then we also, as you say, we have demos with farmers and seed companies, and then we'll get that data back. And all of that goes into a big data pool. And that's important for us just because it's just as important when something works as when it doesn't work. Because also those failures, it's like
Sure.
It gives you information how to fail faster in the future and actually how to speed up that development process.
Yeah. And your customers are mainly in the US and South America, you said. That's the general market. Yeah.
So our first focus is the US. Just to give you guys a feel, that it's about 90 million acres of soybean in the US. It's roughly the same. It's 85 to 90 million of soybean and 85 to 90 million of corn. The biggest growing region of wheat is actually in Europe. But and then South America, I would say, is actually larger in terms of acres or hectares, but in terms of value, so dollars, TAM, it's about the same as the U.S.
And in terms of the actual crops you're thinking about, you said soybean and wheat. So there are others?
Yeah, exactly. So we're focusing on soy, corn, and wheat. And it's really, I'd say, at the heart of our company is this sustainability and the desire to make an impact. We say we want to be the most impactful seed company in the world. And soy, corn, and wheat, they're about 70% of the seed market. They're also about 90% of sustainability issues.
Right.
So by focusing on those three crops, we want to feed the world in a better way. Okay.
So you actually just give us the context on those three crops in terms of sustainability. Like, how can you make it more sustainable? Like, what's the challenge now, and how are you fixing that?
Yeah, so in corn is the largest consumer of nitrogen fertilizer, and nitrogen, if you over-apply fertilizer, it also can turn into nitrous oxide, which is actually, I think, hundreds of times worse than CO2, so greenhouse gas, causes nitrogen runoff, which causes algae plumes in the ocean and is not good for our oceans as well. So those are so certainly we're aiming to grow plants with less land, water, and fertilizer. So with reduction of nitrogen, we can help solve that. In soybean, it's really about actually increasing yield. So I mean, also in corn, actually in all of these, if you can grow more product on the same hectare or acre of land, you actually have less water and fertilizer per bushel or per output that you're creating. So yield is our first focus in both soy and corn. And then wheat, we're just starting in wheat, so we're getting our first field results actually next month. But wheat, the largest consumer of fungicides. So that's it's a future is can we look at the problems in wheat are more on the fungus side.
So you talked a little bit earlier about the use of AI and advanced gene editing. How do you go about thinking, okay, where we're going to deploy capital, where we're not going to deploy capital? How do you make those kinds of decisions?
Yeah, so maybe just one comment on how do we use AI. So we use AI genomes are complex. A soybean has 50,000 genes. Wheat has more than 100,000 genes. Just to put it in perspective, we have about 20,000 genes as people. And the human genome is fairly well understood. So in soybean, for example, out of 50,000 genes, 200 have been published in literature. So we don't know a lot about actually what we're talking about. So we use AI to discover genes. We use AI to filter down and actually decide what the best. And as I said, we actually use then AI to simulate. So when we're thinking about what is the next thing, so I would say we have an innovation team, and they come up with brand new ideas. We, I'd say, kind of typically do a rankings, or we evaluate them. Number one on financial metrics, so that's a business case. That's also near-term cash constraints, because we're still growing, so we always have to look at cash. We look at that in terms of strategic fit, sustainability, and technical feasibility. Those are the four things we look at. And then we decide if we, if we're going to change course. We only do that a couple times a year. See, once we're working on an idea, within that idea, we do a lot of ranking with computers and people, and then actually decide which are the best designs to advance within the process, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and so I wanted to also dig into what you said at the beginning of that previous answer, which is we don't know much about wheat, or we don't. Why is that? I mean, these crops have been farmed for hundreds of thousands of years. Is it weird kind of a period now where there's going to be sort of because of genomic sequencing and AI, where we're going to understand kind of these the natural world, but these crops that we depend on in new ways?
Yeah. Well, I think really, and it's that we are in a unique point in history where we have, number one, the tools to be able to sequence genomes. We have AI to be able to help us understand large quantities of data. So when you say, why is that? I think we're just in a unique part of history that we actually now have the tools at our fingertips to start being able to do a lot of this work.
And just going back to the sustainability question, which I think is so important, and you talked about less nitrogen, increasing yield, and the using less fungicides. I guess in terms of the thinking at Inari and the culture, is that kind of sustainability initiative, is that kind of a core business driver, or is that kind of a good thing that is happening as a result of what you're doing?
Yeah, I would say it is definitely a core business driver. So a lot of the people who joined Inari joined for sustainability, and because they're highly dedicated and motivated by that point. And yes, by focusing on those three crops, we think we can feed the world in a better way. I mean, our first focus is yield, whereas when you say, how do you judge ideas, we can't work on everything at the same time. But the goal of the company is certainly to work on yield, nitrogen, and water. So yield, fertilizer, water, all of those different things, less usage.
And in terms of the big picture, what impact could, having more of the world's agriculture, using less nitrogen, increasing yield, losing less fungicide, what would that kind of look like in a few years if we were able to sort of maybe hit those goals that Inari is pursuing?
Yeah, well, certainly. I mean, one of the biggest things is the WHO thinks that we're going to be 10 billion people by 2050.
Yeah.
So I'd say the very first priority is food security. We can feed the world.
Yeah.
That's the first thing that agriculture as an industry can really help with. And then I think also, reduction of emissions. And the other question is, how do we deal with climate change, right? So as growing zones that may have previously been a great place for corn, if they get too hot, that might not be possible. So how do we actually make plants that can deal with those changes? So it can help on a number of different ways.
Yeah, so actually building agricultural resilience is part of what you're doing. So you raised a big round not long ago. What does that funding let you do maybe that you couldn't do before? Like, how are you going to think about using that capital?
Yeah, so we closed our last private round in January with 144 million US dollars. So very excited about that. And what we're spending it on is really, I say, three things. Science. So we continue to explore the genomes of these plants to figure out genes, gene combinations to solve problems. We are building our pipeline. So absolutely. I mean, one of my things is you get really excited about the science, but it's all about making a product and then making a business out of it. So we're furthest along in soy. We have our first generation of soybean, which is a 6 to 9% yield increase. So we're definitely already seeing, in our first attempt, a big step up. And we're working on corn and wheat. As I said, wheat data is coming out next month. So second one is advancing that pipeline and making sure that we have not just one generation, but second and third generation. So, like to develop and launch step changes, say every 3 to 5 years. And the last one is commercialization. So with our first product, we're excited that it's, we're excited with the results that we've had and that it's proven that the technology is working. And now it's really about getting that into the hands of our seed company customers and into our farmers and out into the fields.
And when you were doing the raise, can you give us a sense of, what kind of partners you were looking for, like what a good fit looked like in terms of, who you were going to be working with moving forward?
Well, I think, let's see. So I'd say we have, if I look at our cap table, we have a very strong cap table worldwide, actually. And generally, I would call them impact investors. Right. They're like, okay, what can we do to strong impacts in the future? So, I wouldn't say there's a specific type.
Right.
It's generalists. It's sometimes we'll have a biotech investor, some we'll have it, but we have one agricultural investor as well. So it's different. But I would say the thing that if you think about the common denominator, would probably be that they're very all saying, okay, we need new companies, we need new technologies to help us solve the big problems of the future, and we're interested in supporting and investing in that.
Right. So give us a sense, just looking forward, like the next sort of 12 to 18 months, what, you talked about the pipeline, what does that look like? What are you hoping to achieve? What are the kind of goals over that time frame?
Yeah, so it's similar to the use of proceeds of that raise. So we're looking at the commercial launch and getting it into the hands of seed company customers and farmers of Soy Gen 1. We're looking at furthering our pipeline, so continuing to work on both soy, corn, and wheat. And the last one I would say we're working on one thing, I'd say that globally has been a bit challenging right now is the regulatory and political environment. So agriculture is truly global. You need an approval where you grow and cultivate your plants. You also need an approval to wherever that gets shipped to, where it's import and consumption approvals. So certainly we have approvals in the US for all of our first generation products. We have them in South America as well. Europe is moving in the right direction. But gene editing is a new technology, and that is right now being I'd say worked throughout the world in all different countries to see what kind of regulations that will have, and that's the last thing. So we call it freedom to operate. So we work a lot on that point as well.
Right. And other than the regulatory environment, kind of what are the other challenges that you have to kind of try and control, or to try what levers you trying to pull in order to move forward?
Yeah, well, so some of it is, so I'd say there is, the previous technology in the 90s was GMO. So we are not a GMO. Gene editing actually makes changes within the natural genome. It's like some people call it speed breeding or accelerated breeding. The same result could be achieved by, for years and years, breeding. So what we can do is in all the countries that already have legislation, we can go and get approvals, which is what we've done.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is we continue to monitor and work with countries and, lend our voice to places like Europe where the legislation is right now in front of the European Parliament. We're hopeful that that will get,
Right.
We think we're actually very hopeful with the direction it's going in, that it's considered as, as non-GMO and it's considered as more conventional-like. But that will, those decisions hopefully will be made by the end of the year. So we'll see.
And just for those people in the room who are thinking about, deep tech startups, like what advice would you have for people who are dealing with science-heavy, companies? What do you think how should they be approaching it? What would your advice be?
So I think that it's, we have a number of brilliant scientists, plant biology, data engineers, and I think sometimes it's so easy to get caught up in how cool the tech is that we forget about making a business. So, the advice I would have is, and what we try and do in our company is, it's definitely about, you need to balance investing in the technology, but also being very conscious that you need to make it a business. You need to make sure that shareholders see a return on their investment. So I think it's not just about making the most impactful seed company in the world. It's also making the most valuable for investors as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a gag there about seed investment as well, but let's not go there. Just looking forward, so everything goes right. What do you hope Inari will look like in 5 years?
Yeah, so certainly I would say, we have significant penetration in the U.S. So what does that look like? It's a mid-double-digit share of the market. That we have a strong revenue growth, strong profit growth as well. And I think that we'll just be well on our way to being that most impactful seed company in the world.
And you mentioned earlier on there's predictions around 10 billion people, climate warming, heating. What do you think we need to do looking forward in terms of what can ag tech do? How can we change things? How can we ensure that there's resilience? How can we ensure that, everyone is getting fed? What are the kind of the opportunities? Sorry, this is multiple questions going on here. So firstly, maybe how can we go about that? And secondly, where do you think the opportunities are maybe for startups in this space?
Yes, I think the entire industry of agriculture can, so agriculture is, it's about a fourth, it's more than 25% of our greenhouse gases, it's about 70% of fresh water on the planet. And there's a lot of things that agriculture consumes. So I think agriculture as an industry is really well poised to tackle a lot of those problems. And when you say how do we go about it, gene editing so we're certainly, I'd say, one of the forerunners in gene editing, but now some of the big players are talking about it as well, which is very encouraging because it's seen as a technology that can really help in this field. But yeah, all players in agriculture, and there's phenomenal things going on with machinery, with as much as, it's not just the only thing, but all of those things can actually help to create a more sustainable food supply.
And in terms of the second part of the question, the opportunities within for startups, where do you think we might see opportunity? Where are there opportunities now, do you think, for startups when they're thinking about this world of ag tech?
Well, there's certainly, if world of ag tech, there's people who are using biological fertilizers. There are other ways to increase yield. There's everything from, if you think of what agriculture could do in general, dream big, right? Can plants absorb more carbon? There's lots of things you could think of, right? So there are also startups out there already. And I think we're probably one of the larger startups out there. We're about 300 people already. We're startups, growth scale company. But there's a lot of problems that I think agriculture can solve, and a lot of companies that are doing just that.
Great. Well, that's a nice, optimistic and hopeful place to end. So, Lara, thank you so much for telling us about Inari, and we look forward to following your progress in the coming years. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Please, after you.